things like that. And it just worked because it was extreme, and it wasn't because, hey, I want you to think about how I process this vocal. He did it all in Logic, probably with stock plugins. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't about the things that nobody else can do. It was about, having that intuitive sense to try something crazy, and until it made you feel something. So I think that's an important lesson from Diddy.
Yeah, straight up. Yeah, and really well said there. I loved this whole spiel on mixing and emotion. I think that's a super great takeaway for the audience. I want to actually ask you about your podcast. You have a podcast called The Record Process. Or is it the record process or is it the record process?
Oh, no, it's the record process. Or is it, though? I don't know. Colbert, who knows? It's whatever we want it to be, It's whatever you want it to be, I guess. Which, maybe was the intent there, maybe was not. Who knows? But
we'll find out.
I do.
Maybe, or we never will. He knows. Yeah, it's Casey's podcast, so obviously.
Yeah, no, we just refer to it as the record process for sure. But yeah,
amazing.
As we are making records,
so tell the audience a little bit about it. Pitch it. Tell us about why you started it and what it's all about.
Yeah. Well, you know what? To be honest with you, Ben, so the impetus for it was pretty much, one, a pandemic, unfortunately, and two, it was mostly just an excuse to take this format that we're communicating in right now and bring some of the conversations about different stages of working in music production that myself and my studio partners were having, working with clients and just hanging around, sitting around, shooting the shit. And we were like, hey, why don't we just do this, for an hour and then kind of just walk through our thought process on things, like some, takeaways that we've learned. Maybe it'll be interesting again back to kind of, helping, musicians and generations kind of organize and structure, and maybe there's some depth in it. If not, we have a good time, and get to talk about it and get to outpour it and reinvest in our creativity too, and rethinking through these things too. So. And that was how the first season came about, which we're wrapping up now, and was pretty much a linear walkthrough of each stage. A couple episodes focusing on capturing inspiration and songwriting, and then a few on pre-production, and then series on tracking, mixing, and then the final mastering stages and releasing and shipping the work. So it was fun. It's great. And now we are starting to get into production for season 2, which will take the conversation outwards and start bringing in some really incredible creative guests to talk through some signature releases from their catalog and walk us and the listeners through how those records came out the way they did.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm excited for that.
Yeah, so am I.
Yeah, amazing. And, I got to ask you as a podcaster, I guess what's been your favorite thing about podcasting, and what's been like one of the biggest lessons you've learned from kind of opening that door, that can of worms,
Yes, quite a can of worms it is. Well, I've learned that I talk a lot, but I think I knew that already. And I've learned that sometimes it's really sometimes what I'm saying is maybe valuable, and sometimes there's real merit to listening to a co-host and or having the other side of a conversation really kind of like expand the way you thought about something, and even us, really close colleagues and friends that we are having a conversation back and forth. You'd think, be like, nothing would surprise me, and then we'll stumble onto something organically, and I'll be like, wow. Yeah, I would have never in 1,000 years thought to bring that up, but that's such a great point. In the same way that you probably have those moments with almost every one of your guests because they're so talented and have such a crazy body of work and history. So that for me is probably my favorite, and what I'm looking most forward to moving forward with having guests is seeing those moments where I just get to have my mind blown all over again like a fan and have those aha moments and take away and share them with our listeners as well. So I'm very excited for it. Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. I get some, I learn something in absolutely every single interview I do, and I get my mind blown, every once in a while. on the air, and that's always really, really fun. And it's fun to just meet people that you're just like really obsessed with their work. And yeah. I mean, for me also, like I would say the biggest, I've mentioned this already, is like the best thing is just meeting people, just relationships. And like, from my little very small music community in Jerusalem, I'm able to kind of meet people in, Atlanta, LA, wherever it is, Australia. I love it. Like, it's just so cool to just meet people and form those connections. And I'm sure that's something that you're gonna love also in the second season, where you're kind of meeting other people as well,
Absolutely. And just sharing perspectives. Everybody has everybody came into the creative world and, making music and art for different reasons at different times in different ways. And I think that's also what I'm looking forward to sharing and exploring as well, how that all informs the final product and the art that gets made,
Yeah, I love it, man. Well, keep it up, man. It sounds great. I will listen to more. I've only listened to a little bit, but I promise I'll keep listening.
Awesome. Yeah, and there's more to come, obviously. So we're gearing up.
Awesome. Well, one more thing that you mentioned to me that off the air is that you're kind of involved in artist development. Walk us through what that's like for you. Who do you choose to work with, and what are maybe a couple key things that you've noticed time and again with artists that you're trying to develop that maybe is like a blind spot for them that you kind of help them work through?
Yeah. So this was another thing that I guess in hindsight, the freedom and space of taking what I do and working with artists outside of the studio and not being able to do that in person for a while due to the pandemic and having to, shut down for a bit. It gave me time and perspective, which is honestly, it always can be very helpful and sometimes to look at what you can actually do and how you can actually serve and work with, clients, musicians better. So I was, from a studio capacity, I kind of took stock of the fact that a couple people that myself, Tom, and Adam had worked with, both locally and even remotely occasionally up until that point, I noticed a trend that we'd get done. And most of these were independent artists as well. So they didn't necessarily have a label, or if they did, it was not a large label by any means. And they would get done, be really happy, proud of the album, proud of how the song came out, appreciative, for the collaboration, and everybody was really excited about it. And I felt like they would come in like, the next session or start to, we'd be at like mix revisions, whatever it was. And they'd be like, yeah, so like, do you have any tips for, how to release this? Like, what do you think? And I started noticing a pattern of like a lot of independent bands, and there are a lot of resources out there, but it's almost so dizzying in the modern like DIY climate where you can do everything, or you're told you can, as an independent artist, you can literally shape and mold and be responsible for your whole career and every part of it. That's super overwhelming. And a lot of younger artists especially are just like, well, where do I start? Like when it comes to like developing that,
Yeah, you also have to like be an artist and write music and
right. And so much of it was focused on
tour.
That. Right. And so much of it was focused on making the music and making it and increasing it and moving it to the next level and working on the craft like that. And so then when it came to, well, how do I like get it out as effectively as possible? How do I get it to reach people, with the resources I have or the knowledge I have? I think that was, the reality of like, it was another pain point where I'm like, hey, I am in no way, some crazy marketing guru, but I'm just a guy that has been in a professional band for quite some time, as it turns out now, and has also been making music and been, wearing the creative production hat as well. So I kind of felt like I started having these conversations and said, all right, well, maybe come in before, the next session, come in an hour ahead of time. We'll sit down and work through and kind of just shape out a little bit of a plan for you. Right. Or, stay later. And that was the one thing that I looked at when, the pandemic hit and everything went remote. I was like, well, I guess I can still do that end of it and maybe help some of them that are interested and are still making music or have music that they've yet to release. And I can take it to a virtual situation like this one where I can still see them and, work through some of these pain points and lack of knowledge and see if I can actually, help find some clarity for them, and maybe help them see what they are and what they've done through a fresh perspective, right? Which is kind of, again, what, the production role as a producer, I think at its best can really help do, and is really meant to do, is helping them see the unique parts of them that are going to help them stand out, and how to bring them out and really, elevate those in their music, and help build the identity and the brand of an artist overall. So it was really just the extension of that too, and helping them do that and roll out this music cohesively. So I've been honestly doing it ever since, and it's just kind of grown. Have a couple, international clients that I do that with, and it never ceases to amaze how motivated, how smart, and how driven some, like, the independent artists really are. And it's really just, having an ally, in the same way that a lot of people might show up and be ready to do the work when they go to the gym, but they don't have, somebody that's meeting them there at that given time and saying, cool, how was your week? How'd you find it? Did you progress a little bit? What'd you do? What are you finding? And having those check-ins and reevaluations, and also saying, hey, that's great. I love how much, whatever it is, I love how much weight you're putting up on that, but your form's a little off. Like, do you know that? But I know that because I'm looking at you from the side. If we kind of fix that, I think you'd be able to put up like almost twice as much as what you're doing in the next like 3 to 6 months, and kind of course correcting there. So it's been fun. It's been interesting for me to dive through each one of these unique scenarios, because, like we said, just because you're a musician and you're independent doesn't mean that the script is exactly the same, because you might have different strengths than another artist. You might have different, different backgrounds, different perspectives, and different goals than another artist. So I think that's been fun for me to adapt and see how I can try to bring value to these people that otherwise are making incredible music, but are worried that it might be getting lost, in its own identity in the maze of like 60,000 plus songs or whatever it is that Carl mentioned, are being released on Spotify every day. So
insane.
Yeah.
There's so much noise.
Yeah. So
yeah,
it's fun.
I mean, if you had one piece of wisdom to share on the podcast for aspiring artists that are trying to cut through that noise, what would be that that one thing you would say?
I think honestly, boiling it down to the idea that don't be afraid to ask for help if because I think a lot of the current climate makes people think that they should be doing it all themselves because they can be, and that if they're not doing it all themselves, that they're failing. And I hate to see that, and hate to think that that's probably very true for a lot of people that, never get things off the ground because they're looking around and being like, well, look at this artist that's all 100% independent and look how huge they got. It's like, but what is the definition of independent? That does not mean that they're doing every single thing that all of these like YouTube, playlist gurus are telling you to do, because there's literally not enough time for one individual to do all of those things and do them well. So asking for help and identifying where you might need help.
It's just an ego thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, you don't need to do all those things.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing as like, me when I got started doing this production things. Like, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do every single, like I was talking about, like delegating,
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to do everything, and it's probably better if you don't do everything. And you'll go faster, further, with the real thing that you want to do if you don't do everything. So I think it's important to kind of figure out what you got to say yes to and what you got to say no to.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, it sounds like you're like part coach, part therapist.
Well,
part a lot of things.
I guess there's a need for all of that. I don't claim to be any of those in a complete licensed capacity, just trying to pass along what I know, and wherever it might be helpful.
Awesome, man. Well, keep it up. Yeah, I feel like I have some people I could probably like refer to you right now. I'm like thinking of some independent artists that like could use a little bit of help. Yeah, this is awesome, dude. It's been a super super fun conversation. I'd love to move into the sauce segment and we can talk about the track that you sent me, and we can kind of have a listen to what you're working on.
Absolutely.
So you sent me a track called "You" by